Here's something that'll blow your mind. Dividends are basically the stock market's version of taking money out of your left pocket and putting it in your right pocket, then celebrating like you just found a 20 on the sidewalk. Sounds crazy? Stick with me. Picture this. A company hands you a crisp $5 bill while simultaneously making your shares worth $5 less. Look, free money, you think, but what if I told you that dividend might just be the world's most elaborate accounting trick where you're essentially paying yourself? Today we're cutting through all the dividend hype to answer the million-dollar question. Are dividends actually making you richer, or are they just financial smoke and mirrors? Fair warning, what you're about to learn might make you question everything you thought you knew about passive income. If you've ever chased those quarterly dividend checks or wondered why some of the world's most successful investors couldn't care less about them, you're about to get some answers. Let's dive in. All right, let's start with the basics of how dividends actually work, because this is where things get interesting. Say you own 100 shares of XYZ company trading at $50 each. Your investment is worth $5,000. The company announces a $1 dividend per share. Exciting, right? You're about to get $100 in cash, but here's what happens on the ex-dividend date. Your shares drop to about $49 each. Your total investment value, still $5,000. The only thing that changed is you now have $100 in cash and a $4,900 in stock instead of $5,000 in stock. This isn't some glitch in the system. It's exactly how dividends are supposed to work. The market automatically adjusts the stock price down by the dividend amount. It's like taking a slice of pizza from the whole pie. You still have the same amount of pizza, it's just distributed differently. Now, I get why people love dividends. There's something genuinely satisfying about getting those cash payments. It feels real in a way that watching your portfolio balance fluctuate doesn't. Plus, there's that psychological comfort of steady income, especially if you grew up valuing financial predictability. I totally understand the appeal, but here's where the famous economists Miller and Modigliani come in with their dividend irrelevance theory. These guys weren't just being academic contrarians, they were pointing out something fundamental. What matters is your total return, the combination of capital appreciation and dividends, not how that return gets delivered to you. Not all dividend situations are created equal, though. Some companies have incredible track records, the so-called dividend aristocrats, like Coca-Cola, Johnson & Johnson, and Procter & Gamble. These companies have raised their dividends for 25 plus consecutive years. They're like the reliable friend who always shows up when they say they will. But here's the flip side. Sometimes companies pay high dividends for all the wrong reasons. Maybe they can't think of anything smart to do with their money, or they're trying to attract investors to cover up bigger problems. When a company pays out more than it actually earns, that's a massive red flag. It's like spending your paycheck plus your savings every month. Eventually, something's got to give. Let's talk numbers for a second. Historically, dividends have contributed roughly 40% of the S&P 500's total returns over the long haul. That sounds huge, but here's the key insight. It wasn't just the dividends themselves. It was the compounding effect of reinvesting those dividends and the underlying growth of solid companies that created the real magic. Now, taxes throw another wrench into the works. Well, actually, in the US, qualified dividends and long-term capital gains get similar tax treatment, but in many other countries, dividends get hammered harder than capital gains. Depending on where you live and your tax situation, focusing too heavily on dividends might mean giving more of your returns to the government. Let's get practical for a minute. Say you're retired and need your portfolio to cover living expenses. Dividend-paying stocks can definitely simplify things. You get predictable cash flow without having to decide which shares to sell. But going all in on dividends might mean missing out on faster-growing companies like Amazon or Tesla, which have historically delivered massive returns without paying dividends. On the other hand, if you only chase high-growth, no-dividend companies, you might end up on a much bumpier ride. Sometimes the sweet spot is somewhere in the middle. And remember, you can always create your own dividend by selling a small portion of your holdings when you need cash. Why do so many people treat dividends as inherently safer? Part of it goes back to major market crashes like 2008, when stock prices are falling through the floor. Getting a dividend check feels a lot better than watching your account balance shrink. That's completely human and understandable, but chasing safe dividends while ignoring everything else can backfire spectacularly. Here's something interesting. Many of the world's most successful investors focus on total returns, not just dividends. Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway famously doesn't pay dividends at all. Buffett prefers reinvesting profits for more growth. If the Oracle of Omaha isn't obsessed with dividend yields, maybe that tells us something. But let's be clear, I'm not saying dividends are evil or useless. They serve important purposes. They can keep company management disciplined about capital allocation, and they provide peace of mind for many investors. The key is not letting dividend obsession blind you to bigger opportunities. Consider Apple, which didn't pay dividends for decades and instead reinvested everything into growth. Investors who held on didn't get quarterly checks, but they got massive capital appreciation as Apple became one of the world's most valuable companies. Apple does pay a modest dividend now, but most of its shareholder value still comes from growth. Would you rather have owned dividend-paying companies and miss the Apple rocket ship? Probably not. Here's another angle. The investing landscape has changed dramatically. 50 years ago, most large companies paid significant dividends. Today, many of the biggest winners, especially in technology, prefer to reinvest for growth. If you stick rigidly to old-school dividend investing, you might miss the next wave of innovation. Your content is informative and valuable, but the flow could be slightly improved for better clarity and readability. Here's a refined version with smoother transitions and minor adjustments for conciseness. Don't forget about inflation either. If you rely solely on dividends and those payments stay flat while prices rise, your purchasing power will shrink over time. That's why it's better to focus on dividends that grow, not just those with a high starting yield, but how can you ensure your dividends grow over time? Isn't that the company's decision? Great question, you're right. Dividend growth ultimately depends on the company. While you can't force a business to raise its payout, here's what you can do. 1. Seek out dividend growers or dividend aristocrats. These are companies with a proven track record of increasing dividends annually for 10, 25, or even 50 plus years. They typically have strong financials and stable earnings, making them more reliable for long-term income growth. 2. Reinvest your dividends. Even if a company's payout grows slowly, reinvesting dividends to buy more shares accelerates your income growth through compounding. Over time, those additional shares generate their own dividends, boosting your cash flow. 3. Prioritize companies with growing profits and healthy cash flow. Businesses that consistently grow earnings are more likely to sustain and raise dividends over time. Finally, diversify across sectors. Holding a mix of dividend-growing stocks reduces reliance on any single company. Some may grow faster than others, but overall, your portfolio's income stands a better chance of outpacing inflation. Here's where dividend investing can get you into trouble. Imagine putting most of your money into high-yield dividend stocks, thinking you found the holy grail of passive income. Then one of those companies hits a rough patch and slashes its dividend. Suddenly your income drops and your stock price tanks too. If you're counting on those dividends to pay your bills, you're in real trouble. High dividend yields often signal high risk. When you see a stock yielding 8% or 10%, ask yourself why. Sometimes it's because the stock price has fallen so much that the dividend yield looks artificially high. Energy companies and telecom stocks are notorious for this. They might offer attractive yields right before they cut dividends or even go bankrupt. Focusing exclusively on dividends can also trap you in certain sectors. You might end up overweight in utilities, consumer staples, and REITs while missing out on the explosive growth in technology, healthcare, or emerging industries. It's like eating only comfort food. Sure, it feels good, but you're missing out on important nutrients. There's also the dangerous illusion of safety. Dividends feel stable and predictable, but they're never guaranteed. Companies can and do cut dividends, especially during economic downturns. Just ask anyone who owned bank stocks in 2008 or energy stocks in 2020. Those reliable dividends disappeared faster than you could say economic crisis. Your life situation changes too. Maybe you're young now and focused on growth, but later you'll want income. Or maybe you retire and suddenly need cash flow. If your entire portfolio is growth stocks, you'll need a plan for generating spending money. If you're all in on dividends and companies start cutting payouts, you might be forced to sell shares at the worst possible time. Many dividend investors also fall into the set it and forget it trap. They buy a portfolio of blue chip dividend payers and assume they're set for life. But companies change, industries get disrupted, and yesterday's dividend darlings can become tomorrow's cautionary tales. Remember Blockbuster and General Electric? These were once considered rock-solid dividend stocks. So how do smart investors navigate all this complexity? The answer is diversification and flexibility. They build portfolios that include dividend payers, growth stocks, international exposure, and maybe some bonds or REITs for stability. They rebalance regularly, taking profits from winners and adding to laggards. This approach helps manage risk while capturing opportunities across different market conditions. Consider adopting a total return mindset instead of focusing solely on dividends. Plan to fund your spending through a combination of dividends, capital gains, interest, and strategic selling. Avoid costly finance mistakes. Finance Fiascos Volume 1 Raw Confessions plus mind map PDFs for bite-sized quick review of these videos. Use code CLUE10 for 10% off today only. This approach gives you more flexibility and prevents you from being locked into any single strategy. There's real value in understanding your own psychology too. If receiving regular dividends helps you stay disciplined and avoid panic selling during market downturns, that behavioral benefit has genuine worth. Investing isn't just about math. Emotions play a huge role in long-term success. Dividend reinvestment deserves special mention here. When you automatically reinvest dividends to buy more shares, you harness the power of compounding. It's like rolling a snowball downhill. It gets bigger and bigger over time. Most brokers offer automatic dividend reinvestment programs that make this effortless. Tax strategy matters more than many investors realize. If you're in a high tax bracket, you might benefit from focusing on capital gains rather than dividend income. Sometimes the difference between keeping and losing thousands of dollars comes down to smart tax planning. Don't overlook share buybacks either. When companies buy back their own stock instead of paying dividends, they're still returning value to shareholders, just in a potentially more tax-efficient way. Fewer shares outstanding means each remaining share represents a larger piece of the company. So are dividends irrelevant? Not exactly. They're a useful tool, but they're not the secret sauce to building wealth. The real key is focusing on total returns while maintaining a balanced, diversified approach that fits your personal situation and goals. Stay alert for yield traps, those too good to be true dividend yields that often signal underlying problems. Remember that sustainable wealth building usually requires patience, diversification, and sometimes boring consistency rather than chasing the highest yields. Think about your entire portfolio, not just the income it generates. Consider reinvesting dividends when possible, but don't be afraid to sell shares when it makes strategic sense. Stay diversified so you're not blindsided when individual companies or sectors hit rough patches. Most importantly, invest in what you understand and what aligns with your life circumstances, not just what sounds exciting in online forums or financial media. The goal isn't to win the dividend game, it's to build long-term wealth in whatever way works best for your unique situation. Want more straightforward, no-nonsense investing insights like this? Hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next.